Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
I
Hey.
think we're all here, especially our most sincere member, Innocent Autopilot. I was joking about it last time with Bogdan, that he's the OG of this group.
Yeah, very loyal.
Let's give a minute or two more. Usually, Nan also tends to connect, so I think she might be coming.
And Bogdan's away this week, did you say?
Oh yeah, he's off now.
Cool.
All right, let's just get started. So welcome to 2023, August 31st, RGV6 Community Call, and the Hyperledger antitrust policy is in effect. We have a usual agenda, no specialties, as I know, today. Perhaps I was just thinking that we could add some sort of a sharing of some knowledge sharing of what's happening in the other meetings, or if there's anything relevant in a wider community in the beginning. So I would do like put a new regular point here, something like community updates. And honestly, I don't have any right now, but we can we can start with that if someone knows anything interesting going on. But yeah, before we get into that, do you guys have anything you would like to put onto today's agenda?
Not for me.
All right, seems like there's nothing. So I don't know how well this is gonna be working out, but I just thinking let's give it a shot. So I don't know. Perhaps I know yesterday there was Aries war group call. Was any of you attending by any chance? To share with us like what's happening. Is if there's any significant or relevant updates for Aries VCX? or any other meeting if you attend any other Aries, Hyperledger, and OnCreds kind of calls.
I didn't attend, but I saw the recording, and the Aries working group call was mainly focusing on proposal of a new DitPeer Numalgo. Taking the learnings from implementing DitPeer 2 and 3.
So are they adding new Numalgo?
Yeah, DitPeer
So it's
4.
before. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was discussion of DitPeer 4 Numalgo.
Oh, I see. And right. So right now we have implemented 2 and 3, right, for did exchange. Is Numalgo 4 a lot different, or is it just some slight variance? What's do you know what's the idea?
Well, not really. I haven't looked into the details too much. I think it was designed to basically contain both the long and shortened form in single Numalgo, and it tries to simplify DitPeer 2 a little bit, just by encoding the entire did doc into the did. So it ends up being a little bit longer, but since it has shorter form included in it as well, which is then exchanged thereafter, it ends up being not such a big issue. So
I see.
It's an attempt to simplify DitPeer 2 and get rid of DitPeer 3, like as a separate Numalgo.
I guess ultimately only one of the Numalgos, I guess, will be used. Do you think that's correct? Like, is it right thing to assume that ultimately everybody will be using, I don't know, Numalgo 4, Numalgo 5, something like that? Or do you think there's a value to the old ones and the first versions like Numalgo 1 or?
Well, those are actually being. I think that Steven mentioned that those are being deleted from the spec, and the spec is being simplified significantly. So some key rotations which used to be part of the spec, which has been part of the spec for a long time and haven't been implemented yet, were removed as like overly ambitious, probably. So. Yes, the older Numangos are being deprecated, and if you are asking whether we will eventually end up with one Numango that we'll be happy with, I would hope so. But at this rate, like we are we are still updating the spec quite frequently, so it may still take some time before we settle on some sort of stable solution. But perhaps Numango 4 is it. I don't know.
Right. I see. Yeah, thanks for update. That's very I mean and kind of well, it's a good catch up since for those of us who haven't been on the call. So this is good stuff. Any other Mira or George, are you aware of any other? I don't know, maybe if I don't think that this week there was an OnCreds call. I think that's upcoming Monday. So I guess there's nothing to update from that side. Yeah, so I guess on that term, just a reminder that there's an OnCreds calls on Monday, 4 p.m. CET. I guess that must be very late in Australian time. Anyway, yeah.
Are you guys attending those?
Yeah, I wanted to join last time, but we got time zone messed up and we missed it. So hopefully next time, hopefully the next Monday.
Cool.
Mentorship updates. So I actually haven't talked with Nan this week. I don't know what's her progress, and we don't have Nan on the call. Miro, we had a session with her. Do you have any kind of a briefing, like where she stands, or what is she's challenging, like what is she's facing right now?
Well, she said she spent a little bit of time with paperwork related to Hyperledger, and right now he's studying your demo, and so yeah, she has not started the implementation yet. Probably, I don't know. But we had meeting on
Right.
on Tuesday, and she said she's studying your demo right now.
Let me have a quick look over here. Perhaps we'll find out something. You look at the pull requests. No, there's not much to look at right now. Okay, I guess we'll
But
find out
I
tomorrow.
guess, yeah.
UniFFI, George. I saw that the happy like a long-awaited moment has arrived. We merged one of the first the first PR for UniFFI.
Yeah. So we merged that first one, which was sort of the foundation of stuff to come. So it was the build scripts and some fixes to the existing implementation and also the framework for a sample app. And yeah, now Swapna's been progressing with the sample app, and I think it's going pretty well. Sort of halfway through the connection protocol. So yeah, the app at the moment will let you create a wallet, and then scan a QR code for a connection protocol invitation, and then pass that in to Unify and send the request off. And then what's left is to do the rest of it, which is receiving the response and sending back an app if required. And then that's a whole connection, really.
Nice. That's great. That's it's coming to reality. Is this demo, and finally we can offer a replacement for libVCX, which we just deleted recently. So a new people looking to build mobile apps. Anyone tuning into this, just make sure to have a look at this demo and the UniFFI project we have in the Coolbees now. This is very overwhelming number of directories. We talked about this, but there's a UniFFI Aries VCX where you find all the good stuff. So there you have it.
A disclaimer that it's a work in progress, but yes, it's all there.
True indeed. Okay, so now back to the a bit more mundane part of the agenda, but very dopamine injected, looking on all the good stuff we got merged in the past week, and there was quite a bit of stuff. So we started finally, after a long time, addressing the issues with the state machines. Didn't jump right into the state pattern, a type of rewrite, but rather kind of more iteratively fixing up the biggest crimes committed in these state machines, getting rid of message sending, and just kind of decluttering stuff which shouldn't be there in the first place. So this particular PR that was for both issuance and presentation, basically changing kind of the way the user interact with these state machines or handlers, and separating out anything related to mediated connections, which we have deprecated a long time ago. So we try to keep these core protocols and kind of mediation helpers, which are still used in tests, separated, so we can easily delete them further down the road. We have some action steps here. So the next step which followed this one and kind of still follows is removing IO. Well, not really all of the IO, but really the message sending. This is about the tests, right? So let me see. Yeah, well, right. Ultimately, the goal is to have a test for credential issuance and presentation, which do not use connection protocol and did come in the first place, just exchange messages in the memory. But there's some steps to reach that point, and so, yeah, we have. I'll jump a little bit, but we have a PR open for that in progress to remove the message sending for issuer and holder. Essentially, just make it opt-in for now because tests are still requiring it. But ultimately, as I mentioned, that will be gone, and there shouldn't be any message sending IO in the tests, and neither in the core part of these state machines. So this is still in progress. Well, it's ready for review essentially. So have a look at it, guys, while we are at it. Now back to the overview of the work done. We have some fixes on the prover. This was something related with incorrectly failing to select a credential if a verifier submitted a proof request which specified both satisfiable and unsatisfiable restrictions, but these restrictions should be treated with OR. So only one restriction set needs to be satisfied. So this addressed that for prover. So now prover can satisfy a more variety of proof requests. Next up, we had similar improvement, related improvement on the prover. That was about implementing support for names attribute in the proof requests. So, well, there's a spec for what the names should represent, and we didn't support it after we added the CredX implementation for add-on creds. Now we support it. So again, we have a wider range of proof requests we support with CredX prover. Yeah, we had UniFi demo and scripts merged just freshly this morning. We mentioned that we had old PR, ancient PR merged as well to replace OpenSSL dependency by a smaller dependencies, NumBegin and SH2. Yeah, so this was pretty trivial, and that's merged now. And then some fixes or improvements. What is this? Included peer tree in also known as field in result DDoS. So kind of an improvement with the peers. A minor stuff, I guess, not worth going deep into this. Yeah, and then again in the review we have still did exchange and the ATHPR. That's a draft. There's no conversations here. Do you know, Mira, what's the kind of, if you had any communications with the AATH folks about it? If there's, I don't know, if there's any updates on this.
Well, I had a little bit of communication with somebody from AFJ, and like right now, this is, I haven't worked on this because the Akamai DitPeer implementation seems to be still in progress and changing. So I basically decided to wait until it becomes a little bit more stable to test against it. Although G. Sarot said that it's the Akamai implementation is nearly completed, so maybe I can resume testing. However, the whole DidExchange protocol, or the entire work on the DidExchange protocol, which for us includes DitPeer as well, has been kind of paused as we are awaiting certain clarifications regarding the attachments or attachment signatures especially in a response. And also the issue is that the current version of the DidExchange specification is, I would say, lacking in multiple respects. It speaks about signatures in requests, and responses, it doesn't clarify which keys are supposed to be used, doesn't clarify why these signatures are necessary. And for DitPeer, there is, or resolvable dates, altogether there is the issue that it speaks about including the entire DidDoc signed in the attachment, which is clearly unnecessary in case of resolvable dates. And so, like, there are multiple changes that would ideally have to be made in the DidExchange protocol, but since there are already existing implementations of it, the problem is to try to come up with a way to make the minimum or try to make non-breaking changes to the protocol, so that we don't have to come up with a major update of the protocol. Yeah, so this work is on hold for now until these things are clarified. And then there is another issue, even regardless DidExchange or outside of DidExchange, with related to AATH, where AFJ doesn't support unqualified credential identifiers anymore, and AATH, on the other hand, assumes unqualified credential identifiers in the issuance test suite. So in order for AFJ to be able to update their backchannel, there needs to be an update to AATH as well, which would have a break, or possibly break, certainly our implementation, because we are still using unqualified credential identifiers. Perhaps there is a work around this on the backchannel level, I don't know, but still it might break other frameworks backchannels as well.
So it feels like, I guess, if I kind of conclude all these things, like there's lots of ongoing work on like DidExchange, and that's, since it's DidExchange, we are exchanging DIDs, and the community is trying to kind of developing these DidPeers, right? So ultimately like the DD exchange is kind of still on a move, although some existing I mean, I don't know, I guess I would call it semi legacy implementation of DD exchange exists in the frameworks, but it feels like they are trying to find the state of the protocol which would be with regard to DIDs themselves, DID peers, which would be satisfiable and like sufficient have sufficient longevity, and it's just kind of still on a rail moving, and it's we are kind of just, we don't have any legacy, so we are kind of following where the ball is going, and it keeps going somewhere, so we can't really say that we have something stable. It's
That's what kind of going for us. We don't have any legacy. We don't have to support any legacy implementations of the exchange,
Yeah.
which is good. But there are multiple issues. One is ATH. One is DID exchange for us, because we would like to keep ATH alive and be able to test interoperability between Akapai and FJ, definitely, and other frameworks as well. And regarding DID exchange, there are also like multiple like sub problems that need to be solved. And so we just we just have to wait until those are solved. So the exchange implementation is kind of blocked, and the AATH stuff, there needs to be an update made to the AATH itself.
Right.
I think that there is a community-wide agreement that AATH should move to use qualified identifiers, regardless of whether it breaks the existing back channels, because this is the optimal state that we are going for, that we'll be using qualified identifiers in issuance protocol.
I guess the same goes for DIDs, right? I mean,
and the same goes for DIDs, exactly.
Yeah. So I guess for us, I would suggest that we still get DID exchange merged and just mark it as, I don't know, unstable or experimental, because we don't have a need to freeze it on like incomplete state, which will probably go out of date as things are changing in the community, and then be worried about breaking changes. So I guess I would suggest we merge it, just mark it as experimental or unstable. But I think in terms of the state machine approach and like our internal code base style, I find it pretty much ready. And so also that links to your comment, because I wanted to, you said that it's not ready for review, and I understand from some perspective it's not, and some things protocol wise are not defined. I think we can just kind of accept that for now, and just review it, you know, given what we know about and what has been stabilized about the exchange protocol. I think we can all get reviews on this and get it merged. What do you think?
So if you are going to merge this, I would like it to be interoperable with at least one other framework. So since I've been testing against Akapai, I have removed some things that I've added only to make the interop work there. So I will put them back and try to get it to a state in which it is interoperable with Akapai.
Well, on this, from this perspective, it's kind of, I guess it's kind of blocked by the fact that Akapai doesn't have the AATH DID exchange back channel ready yet, isn't it? I guess it makes sense to just wait for them to finish
No,
that
no, no.
piece.
The exchange is an old protocol, and there's already a controller for this in Akapai back channel.
But there was some
That's not an
changes
issue.
necessary to Akapai, no?
Not to Akapai. I mean,
Ah.
on our side. I meant on our side.
Okay, right.
Yeah, because I thought that they either don't make sense or are against the spec, but I can add them back. The main goal there is to be interoperable, I think. Or I may take a look exactly at the changes I had to make and decide whether I will raise them to somebody or whether I will
I
put
mean,
them back. But
it's not. I think it's not like urgent, but at the same time, I think it's it's like then you have to keep rebasing the PR and stuff like that when we do some changes or like refactor across the base. So I wouldn't mind to the exchange not being fully interoperable yet, as far as it's experimental and it works at least between Ares v6 instances. But
yeah. Well, the question is to what extent it is useful, or if it's not interoperable with anybody. But yeah, it's probably like close to something that will be interoperable at one point.
yeah, it's close, and we can if it's very experimental, it doesn't. Yeah, people should expect some stuff might not be complete yet.
If we add support for DPR1, and if AFJ updates at least their did exchange controller, because it doesn't rely on credential identifiers, it's independent, so we can test against them. Perhaps we can, with not that much effort, we can get this to a state in which it is interoperable with both Akapai and AFJ.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, but we can do it in a separate PR as well if you want to, if you really want to merge it.
Yeah, we could do that. George, what's your take? So I'm not like just pushing my agenda here.
This isn't really my domain at the moment, so feel free to push your agenda, because
maybe in terms of the approach, and you don't really need to know the implementation details, but this is not interoperable yet because things are kind of still not clear. Some things are not clear, and there's different problems with AFJ and with Akapai to get it interop in AATH. So the question is like, should we wait? Should we keep this just a PR and just kind of maintain it over time, or do you think it's better to merge it and just mark it as experimental or something like that?
I mean, we haven't shied away from doing that before, merging things in that are technically experimental. So I'm not opposed to doing that. Guess it sort of depends on how long it'll take for those other dependencies to get resolved.
Yeah,
because maintaining this big branch will get annoying, I think. Although it's probably pretty isolated, right?
Yeah, it's kind of independent, mostly independent of other code. It's kind of foundation. It's not touching anything else that much.
Okay, well, we all put our opinions. I guess ultimately we can make we don't have to make decision right now, but I think if we, maybe I wouldn't want to drag the PR for like a month if it's gonna take a long time to get those interrupts sorted out. but yeah, let's move on. So we got some notes here about what the issues are. It was a good knowledge sharing also. In review, okay, so updating CI host, that's just some CI change. Apparently, this doesn't work because of some nightly version of Rust or the code coverage stuff, which is running cargo a bit differently, and it's failing on a linking issue. So I guess something that needs to be looked into before that can be merged. Then we had in the progress also, well, it's also ready for review, indeed. Changes to connection protocol, and this is mostly in line with the changes being done in the similar changes being done in the issuance and prover protocols. So this comes with some breaking changes. For example, the one of the states for invitee is removed here, so it wouldn't be deserializable anymore. I suppose this could be actually we could technically avoid making this breaking change if we do some like a bit some more invest some more time into backwards compatible deserialization to map the old state responded to perhaps a complete state instead or something like that. But I feel like there wouldn't be like typically if you have state machines, they would end up in the complete state, and not sure if it's very valuable. George, and this is on invitee side, so it's kind of a question for George here. Are you okay with this kind of breaking change? You're using it from the invitee side mainly?
Yeah, yeah. I always call the send act at the end. But I suppose that can be done outside of these state machines. Is that what you're proposing consumers do?
Yeah, well, yeah, ultimately that's what the PR, that's the flow which the PR is changing. So it's about removing those send methods. So we removed send egg in the responded state, send request in the invited state. Instead of that, you get the methods get egg and you have to send that egg on your own. Equally, instead of send request, you call prepare request. Which kind of builds the request but doesn't send it, and you have to send it on your own. And then it turns and then since the send act kind of method was removed, and originally this was the state machine flow, you reach responded state, then you call the method send act, then that would get you to complete state. Now that we wanted to remove the kind of message sending IO, I got rid of this method, and so I was left out with this requested to responded. But so then essentially there was two options. Either I would just make this the final state, after the handler response, you would end up with responded, and that would be it. But for the backwards compatibility, for the sake of backwards compatibility, typically it's presumable that typically people have ended up with the state machines in complete state, and so it seems more like reasonable to, and also just conceptually it feels more reasonable to go from requested directly to completed, and that way all the old completed state machines can be still deserialized and work with as usual without any breaking changes. And also it just sounds kind of better because you reach the complete state. But yeah, you need to keep track of sending egg on your own, as the state machine doesn't watch that for you anymore.
Yep, yeah, that matches my understanding. Yeah, I missed the get ACK method, but now that I see that, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Similar change also on the inviter side. So there's less changes there. So it removes responded state and also removing instead requested. So I guess after you receive the connection request, you would previously call send response, and that would get you to responded state. Now that this method is removed, there's no way that this state doesn't make any sense anymore, because it only existed to help you track whether the response message has been sent or not. Now that we don't do it, and it's actually responsibility of the consumer of the state machine, there's instead method get connection response message, and you just have to send it on your own and keep track of whether it was sent or not on your own. So after that, there's only transition to complete state after any message from the counterparty arrives. So that's that. Any comments on this one?
Sorry, you said it transitions after any message. Is there like an actual API to trigger that transition, or is it just something the consumer should work at?
There is well, it's again responsibility of consumer to make that last transition after they receive some message. But if I look at inviter, let's see, inviter, this must be here. And I guess I'm gonna look at the raw file. Completed. Basically, yeah, when you are in state requested, which means you have got the request and probably generated the response and send it, then basically you can also then follow that up with transition using this method acknowledge connection, where you just pass any message, which presumably, that's again up to the consumer, which presumably comes from the counterparty, and it transitions to complete. Honestly, I'm not sure if this is also worthy. It feels like if we removed the tracking whether the egg on the invitee was sent or not, perhaps we should also not have a special state to track whether some sort of egg was received or not by inviter. I mean, from the inviter, I don't know.
Yeah, it is sort of a bit awkward, because if the consumer gets to the point where they're ready to call .acknowledge connection, it doesn't really provide value to them, because if they've figured out that the message is for this connection, then
it's kind of forcing the inviter consumers to do this. Otherwise, you end up in sort of incomplete state, although technically you are already ready to receive any kind of message, right? I mean, you might get you send the response, and then you get, I don't know, a credential proposal, and you now have to make sure that you actually transition the connection state machine to complete state. Well, technically you don't have to, but it feels kind of bad because you ended up in some intermediary state, and right, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Mira, what do you think about this? Because you also did did exchange, and you reduced lots of states. So
well, first of all, I don't know how I feel about removing the state, but I'm just thinking the message. If you send a message response and then receive presentation request, for example, since you are checking the thread ID, it seems that the thread ID of the presentation request would have to be the same as the one of the connection related
actually-
conversation.
It doesn't have to be, you know, per spec. The spec is saying that after the inviter sends the response, any message which comes from that counterparty is counted as an egg. You know, it can be unrelated.
That's what I mean. That's why
Yeah.
I'm asking why we are verifying the thread ID there.
Oh, are we?
Mm, yeah, 251.
Oh, so it doesn't even make. Oh, yeah, that's right. So this doesn't even make sense.
Hmm. Yeah, good catch.
Yeah, we can. I guess typically, typically it tends to be the egg. Like implementations usually send the egg, but yeah, technically, this is not a valid assumption that the thread is going to be the same. Good catch. Yeah, so maybe I'll give it a consideration. Perhaps it would make sense to turn the requested state into actually complete state, because right now the requested and complete state are almost the same thing. I mean, they hold the same data.
Well, to some, you may say that the connection implementation should read as the RFC. Should kind of, I think that there should be some correspondence between the internal states and the states of the actual protocol as specified in the RFC. And if we are removing states and renaming them like this, just thinking that we are kind of deviating from the RFC in a way.
But no,
I think that the ideal implementation would kind of, you know, you can kind of, you should be able, you should be able to infer perhaps one from the other. Just looking at the code, perhaps you should be kind of able to infer how the RFC looked.
I'll have to disagree. Well, I think we also like broke that a long time ago. When
yeah, we did. I'm not saying that we didn't.
Intermediary.
Yeah, I'm not saying. And there, like, of course, the RFCs are not ideal. There have been written before an actual implementation, and so they didn't take into account some consequences, perhaps, of the decisions that were made in the RFCs. So I completely agree that it's perhaps introducing unnecessary complexity code-wise. But on the other hand, yeah, I'm also thinking, yeah, perhaps, yeah, I'm not entirely convinced either way. Perhaps we should kind of smooth out the let's say the incompleteness of the RFCs or the I don't know.
George, you're unmuted for a moment.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure how I feel about making it exactly like the RFC. I'm just imagining the transition from requested to responded would be sort of meaningless in the code, I guess, because I'm not sure what that would look like.
I also have still mixed feelings about this, honestly. I guess
let's imagine that you are writing some kind of test just based on the RFC, and you want to ask the state machines during the test, like in what state they are in, and verify that the state corresponds to the one in the RFC. I think this is kind of imaginable, I think.
Oh, that's essentially the ATH, right? Case.
Right. Yes.
Well, I think I personally don't find it like maybe worthy necessary to. I don't find it too valuable to
Hmm.
follow that from the principle just to make sure that it's the same, because those states are
Superfluous.
yeah,
Redundant.
sometimes, but what is maybe I have mixed feelings about is basically having this kind of sent state. Like now we are getting removed the IO, so that's something that has to be done either way. But then once you remove the IO, like it as this PR shows, it kind of leads to the point where you also remove the states, the sent states. But technically, you could still have them as kind of a marker state, right? Like you transition. It would be the responsibility of the consumer to kind of call, believe they have sent the whatever message, the response, and then value of that is that if you don't have this marker state, it could happen that you receive, well, no, not really. Something like, some sort of malicious actor would send you, what would they do? You get a request connection. Let's say you get connection request. You send a response, and if you don't track that you sent the response, then the request received and response sent are kind of the same thing for you. And if you transition to response sent, you will never accept the request again. So if we don't have the marker state, the send state, and technically the counterparty could send you connection request twice. And no, they wouldn't. No.
I mean, maybe it'd stop you from accidentally sending the response twice
Yeah.
if you get some weird logic, but yeah.
Yeah, right. It doesn't really prevent something. Maybe prevents you, yeah, as you said, from doing a mistake. But that's an obscure way to try to help the consumers.
Yeah.
And almost assuming that they are going to be really making some weird mistakes. So I don't know. That being said, I guess like I indeed don't see much value in the marker kind of state. Marker, but yeah, this is a little bit different case, I guess, because most of these kind of marker states, like they tend to be something sent, request sent, response sent. But this is marking whether the counterparty has followed up with any message after the connection response was sent. So the question is it valuable help for consumer to help them track whether the counterparty has responded? I think
I guess if you're in the requested state and you haven't called get connection response message and you haven't sent it out, I suppose a consumer could accidentally do dot acknowledge connection when really the connection should not be ready to transition to that state yet if you haven't sent out the response. Whereas if it's like the marker responded state that a consumer has to explicitly transition into to state that they have indeed sent the message, then they can only call .acknowledge connection after they've told us that they have sent out the response.
Yeah,
So
it
then-
almost feel like it makes sense to either merge it all together, like have a complete state which would essentially encapsulate the requested, response sent, and acknowledged into into one singular complete state, or then kind of do the other, I don't know, extreme, the opposite approach of having the marker states for it. So like requested, and then make sure that the user marks it as send, and then only from the send, only after they mark it as send, they would be able to acknowledge it, right? Maybe just a question of which of these two extremes, or I don't know, polars is better, or how much we want to, how do we want to, what are we actually solving with the state machines? Because well, it's the logic, it's tracking the data, but then and like linking the data across the transitions, and then potentially this like kind of marking some kind of events, right? Where you mark that something was sent, you mark that acknowledge that the connection was acknowledged. How much rails we want to give the user.
I hadn't thought about this. When is Bogdan back?
Next week. So we better figure it out. Nah, just kidding. But yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I'll think about it a little bit more. I don't know about this thing, this acknowledgement.
In the fullness of time, we'd also have the message processor concepts, right?
Yeah, and that could technically completely kind of, well, yeah. So the idea with the message processor, right, is that we would pull the kind of processing logic down from the state machine, so you wouldn't necessarily have to use state machines, and you could build something on top of that without the state machine. So ultimately, the state machines can be just kind of addition, opt-in addition for people. It's kind of rail.
Yeah, I don't know. That sort of makes me feel like the state machines should be the railings, and that these marker states do make sense.
Right.
We're also providing the other alternative.
Mira?
Sorry, what's the argument for removing it again?
The argument for removing
the completed state, merging it with requested.
I guess it just
throw away the like you separate the information that the first message was received from the connection state machine completely.
It's just doubting whether it's valuable to force users to track whether the acknowledgement was received.
How are you forcing them? They don't have to call you don't have to. They don't have to like track the.
Then you end up in a requested state. It's just kind of ugly because it's not the kind of final state. Like you don't have to call it, and technically you can indeed use the connection. but just kind of
Well, then you don't. You can't say that the connection is completed if you haven't received the first message. No, it's entirely possible that the response was not received, for example.
that's possible, yeah. So, and yeah, if we would remove this, then we would, yeah, essentially get rid of the complete state, or basically that would make us rename requested state a complete state, and that would be like really huge merge of possibilities of what it can represent. Basically, the complete state would end up being a state where you have received a request, and you might have just received it, you might have sent the response, or you might even receive the acknowledgement, and it's all of those three things. So
Exactly,
that
and you're
feels kinda
completely
bad.
losing the information about what stage is the connection protocol even at. So
Right.
kind of.
Yeah, I think those two states should definitely be separate. I'm sort of stuck about whether there should be the marker state in between the marker being responded.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I think what's good is we found ultimately we found consensus that we're gonna keep this, although I had doubts about this, and I'm glad you guys got me on the right track, and we all agree. So this is gonna stay, and we're gonna have requested and complete state. And yeah, I don't know about the marker state, but technically, if we decide that we are missing it and we want to have, if we want to distinguish between requested and responded, we can always just kind of add the marker state back as its intermediary state, as far as we tolerate this kind of breaking changes in intermediary states.
Another question is, how long are we going to keep the connection protocol at all? Since this has been quite an ongoing effort in the community to replace connection protocols with DidExchange, and yeah, the existing connection implementations are using legacy DDoC formats, and there is, at least it seems to me that there is quite an incentive to get rid of it. At least from what I heard. For example, Akamai recently did some refactoring and broke their ATH connection protocol because they made some changes to it after a long time, and it just made changes to the legacy DDoC, and it's very fragile, it's outdated, and like on our side, we are also like using the legacy DDoC implementation and the Aries service implementation, which are like
I think
there is no specification which they abide by. It's just they have been created from some sort of temporary placeholder specification or something, but
evolution.
Yeah,
I think so for now, I think everybody's using like lots of parties is still using connection protocol, so I think it needs to be kind of a transition. Well, we are, I suppose, George,
yeah,
you are, and given the state of DidExchange, kind of, you know, how support is in the community, and the AATH, these things and how it's keep changing, I don't see how it can be actually feasibly used somewhere, right now, as it keeps changing. I think it's to stabilize a little bit, and then we can stabilize our implementation, and then after connections not used anymore, or is like, yeah, kind of there's I guess there needs to be some period where both are in the code base, both the exchange and connection, and then once connection is kind of not used anymore much, then we can delete it and move to the exchange completely.
Oh, I'm not sure how much it's used in the world. I thought that the exchange has been preferred protocol for quite a while for establishing.
Well, it just confuses me that the all the hurdles with the peer. Maybe it's because they're using the older peer,
Yes.
which are stable. Maybe, yeah. But we don't want to go. It feels like the current that did exchange, the version of the exchange used in the wild. Turns out it's kind of like I don't know, a certain stage of development of the exchange, and now it keeps moving to something more final. So I think we'll have to wait for the final, then keep both connection and the final did exchange, and then move off connection to the exchange completely. Okay, we are a bit over time. Let's just run through it quickly. So there's the IO, and then we have Aries VCX demo open that's building on the connection changes. We have Ledger Trade Refactor. We don't have Bogdan to tell us about that, so probably next week. And then extract message sending from prover and verifier. That's the same type of essentially the same type of changes as done for issuer and holder, but on this protocol. So this is in progress now. Yeah, and that's it. George, I know it's late for you, so I don't want to hold you too long here. But either way, if there's any last comments or thoughts, feel free.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you guys spent much time with V2 of the issue credential and present proof protocols?
No,
Or
not
No.
really.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, just bringing it up because I think that's something sort of coming into my radar soon. And I assume it's something that Aries VCX is interested in.
Sure. I think it's a good timing that you say it now, because as we're sorting out these state machines now, I think it links down nicely. I wouldn't want to add these V2 protocols in the past where those state machines implementations, when we had the lack of clarity about what state machines are for, and and they were also still messy. I mean, that's what we are sorting out now, removing IO, make sure that they're easier to test, things like that. So I think the natural progression is like we can actually start adding more protocols as we sort out these state machines, and well, ideally also bring in the state pattern after we sort out the IO removal, and then we could start adding the V2, I think.
Cool. Well, yeah, just
what's your kind of I don't know, time frame or horizon, where you would ideally want to start dealing with like V2 of credential exchange, or and also second question, what's your kind of incentive or reason? Is it what's the kind of business benefit for you in those V2 protocols, as opposed to V1 version? If there's anything specific.
I think that sort of agnostic payloads of what's within the issue credential and present proof is the main benefit. Particularly W3C creds being a supported payload for those. That's sort of partly the incentive to start taking it seriously from my end. So yeah, just mentioning it at the end. It'll probably be something I think about for the next couple of weeks and talk to you guys about what a solution might look like.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's definitely on the roadmap. I think we even I don't want to drag this out for too much more, but I think that was part of 2023 kind of a roadmap. Was to also start adding is a ledger agnosticity, add more, explore Bitcoin 2 and widening Aries protocol support, did exchange, that's what we are doing now, and then issuance and presentation protocols. We have 3 more months to address it. I think we can actually dab into this this year. So
cool.
Speaking of issuance, I would like to mention it again. Sorry to be annoying, perhaps, but I would like to make it clear that we should migrate the entire code base to use qualified identifiers. Qualified dates and credential identifiers as well.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of discussions regarding state machines and protocols, but this is something that also needs to be on radar.
Yeah, it's especially important for the AATH, right?
Yeah.
And AATH is crucial.
I would say that, even looking at the roadmap mentioning ledger agnosticity, this is something, qualifying the identifiers is something that would have to be done to be ledger agnostic as well.
Indeed. That would be
and
perhaps
I would also
even pre-requirement for uncreds RS. I mean, if you don't, you can sort out, you can start supporting these ledger identifiers without uncreds, but you can, I guess, really implement uncreds RS without the identifiers.
Possible, I don't know. Another thing that's quite kind of bothering me is the legacy DDoS that we are using in connection. I have already mentioned.
Yeah, that will be a big burden to drop once we get rid of that. Okay, that's a good call. George, any other point?
No, nothing from me. Thanks.
Mira?
Nothing.
Okay. Well then, thank you for your time. It was a bit over, but it was productive, I think, and pleasure. So thank you. Have a good week and see you next time. Cheers.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a good one.